Excellent.
Tonight we're going to do volume 3 of the NookChat, and it's going to be on the early schools of the Everson area. And my wife, Inez, is here because she was a student in a school that was built in 1906 as a one-room school. It was a two-room school when she went there, but she went through all 8 grades in this little school called Glen Echo that still exists as a building.
Thinking back to those early school years, Inez, I wonder if you can remember what recess time looked like for the girls and for the boys.
Recess time for girls.
Recess. I think if we could go outside to play, we would. If it rained, no. I think we'd play games on the blackboards. I think. Yeah.
The boys and girls pretty much played the same games.
Yeah.
If you look at the pictures, the girls would get down and dirty just as much as the boys were down and dirty. And they were swinging on swings, and I remember the days when the swings were high, and you tried to swing as high as you could. If you fell off one of those things, you got hurt. I don't know any of you did this sort of thing, but the seesaws were long 2x12s normally, and they were long. And if you got somebody way up in the air and you stepped off, that person on the other came down really quick. And that was so much fun. But people got hurt. But they were patched up at school, and that went on with school day.
So how long were when did they incorporate it into the modern school system? When did Glen Echo and all these other schools go out?
42. There was a consolidation in 30. That was the one that Everson wouldn't join with Nooksack. And then there was a consolidation in 42, and that ended all of the little schools. All of them went to bigger schools. And that would be, I would say, the beginning of the modern era.
So why did Everson go to Mount Baker?
That's a good question. What I have been told is that the Everson people would not join with the Nooksack people under any circumstances. And even whenever they did join in 42, they joined on one condition, that it be named the Everson Nooksack Sumas School instead of the Nooksack Sumas School. And in 1948 or 49, they changed it to the Nooksack Valley School District again. It was originally the Nooksack Valley School District in 1884, but it was not until 48 that it became Nooksack Valley again. There was another consolidation, which I was on the school board, and the school board doesn't even know about this, but I found out that in 1918, Clearbrook wanted to have a 4-year high school, and Nooksack did have a 4-year high school, and so they joined with, the high schools joined. They had a 2-year high school at Clearbrook, and they wanted a 4-year. So they joined with Nooksack at Nooksack, but they graduated as Clearbrook and Nooksack, but they were called the Victory School District.
I remember the name, yeah.
And because I was looking through the census records, and all of a sudden Nooksack disappeared, and I couldn't figure out where they went. And then I found this Victory School District, and I couldn't figure out where that was because I'd never heard of Victory School. And so I looked up the names, and I said, those names are Clearbrook names and Nooksack names. So then I researched a little further, and I found out that in 1919, they became the Victory School District, and they were Victory School District until 30, when they joined with Sumas. And then, of course, Clearbrook didn't have a high school anymore, and they built a new high school that was midway between Sumas and Nooksack. And, of course, Everson went to Mount Baker. So Inez wanted to take piano lessons, and Mount Baker offered free piano lessons. and her family could not afford piano lessons, so she went to Mount Baker to take piano lessons
For 2 years.
for 2 years.
But I had to walk.
And the Nooksack bus went right by her house, but the Mount Baker bus, closest point was a mile away. So she walked a mile down to the Motor Inn to get the Mount Baker bus, then which Don Rackendiver was already on, so she always remembered that.
I had to walk from right near Nooksack all the way to Everson one day. The bus driver told me to get off because I was hooping it up.
You got kicked off the bus?
I did, yeah.
Not Don
I
Rackendiver.
did.
But he was seated in that seat.
Yeah. I don't remember that.
The question was raised about bicycles early on. There were no way to ride a bicycle. The roads were so bad that even in the late 40s, when I was learning to ride a bike, you could not learn to ride a bicycle on the roads because they were all gravel roads, very loose gravel. So you learned I learned in our Gilbert orchard where I could fall and it was nice and soft. And but it was hard riding too. But I remember once my front wheel locking, and I'm going over the handlebars and landing on all 4 points, and I tore both my elbows out and both my knees out, landing on that loose gravel. And then of course they came out with these narrow wheeled bikes. There's no way you could ride anything. They had to have pavement for that. So the big balloon tires, we could ride on gravel, but it was so difficult and it was so tiring that people walked. Even like I would walk to Everson rather than try to ride a bike to Everson, 2 miles. So.
Yeah, in San Francisco, the bicyclists were the drive for paved roads way before
Yes, we had in those days what we called the pavement. The Lawrence Highway was a pavement. The Everson Road was a pavement, the Pole Road, but everything else was gravel. And but they were paved very early. But like the Pacific Highway was paved in 21. So up until 21, there was no pavement in the county. That's the first concrete road was what became known as our Mexico to BC Highway now. We call it Interstate 5 now. But we used to go down the Pacific Highway and down Chuckanut. And
101.
Chuckanut was the main highway between Bellingham and Point South.
Now it's called the 101. The 101, Highway 101.
It became 101, yeah. It is, by the way, it is the oldest scenic highway in the United States by 3 months.
3 months.
The scenic highway in Long Island when they put the bridge in, Long Island became part of the mainland. So that eliminated that scenic highway, and there's another scenic highway on the East Coast, which became a scenic highway 3 months after Chuckanut did. So, you know how Chuckanut was built?
No, I don't.
The brickyard. The brickyard.
Brick?
They got a brickyard down there.
They took the prisoners, the jail inmates down with pick and shovel. And they picked that whole thing open with prisoners. So we got some use out of it. Those people earned their pay, because that was tough going. Okay, I think we pretty well covered early schools. There are lots of stories, but one of the pictures in the book is the teacher lived up on the Breckenridge Creek. Directly it's about a half mile from the school. And so she had all the students, she just invited all the students to walk home with her, and they had a picnic in the creek. Well, one of her cousins was told, don't go in the creek. And there's a picture in the Nooksack book, in the Glen Echo book, which shows Thorwald standing in the middle of the creek with his pants rolled up so they wouldn't get wet. And I don't know if he knew, because the picture was being taken, they didn't in those days they had to pose pictures, and the teacher took the picture and he got into trouble for violating the rules of home. I remember the earlier days, not with me, but people a little bit older said, if you get in trouble in school, just wait till you get home. So then the student was never believed over the teacher. The teacher was always right, the student was always wrong, which is about 180 degrees from where we are today. One of the stories that we'll go, they're unnamed, but we had we had hot water registers that heated our school, and they had casings over so students wouldn't touch the hot radiator and get burned. And one day when we got to school, this is the high school, Sumas Nooksack High School. One day when we got to school, it didn't smell good. And somebody had gotten in, and I found out, I know who they are, they were in my high school class, got in over the weekend and put Limburger cheese on all the radiators.
It happened in my day too.
And so whenever the teachers got there and turned on their radiators, by the time they found out that there was cheese on it, it was melted down through the radiator. I remember our art teacher liked it cool, so he didn't turn his radiator on. And whenever everybody else was having smelly rooms, he didn't have a smelly room because he went in and took the Limburger cheese off before he put it on, before he turned the heater on. But there were still things like that going on in schools, in the early schools, Karen. Are you that, or Elaine, are you that old? Do you remember the early schools?
No, but in my day we had Limburger cheese too in Nooksack Valley, in the accounting teacher's room. And
they probably didn't learn from previous students, did they?
I think I could tell you his name. I'm not quite
There
sure.
was one, 3 years ago, we had a teacher that came back to the Nooksack Valley High School reunion, which is the old timers, graduated from high school 50 years ago, are meeting next Saturday at the elementary, Nooksack Elementary. And 2 or 3 years ago, they had a teacher that came back. He's 106. And he says, I never did know who put or fixed my car. He went out to start his car one day, and smoke poured out from under the hood of his car. And I can't remember exactly what they did, but he says, is anybody here know who did that? Because I wondered for all of these years who did that. And there was some of this. It was Darrell Ellers, and he fessed up to it. He says, well, but he says, I knew probably nothing was wrong with the car, but I knew that somebody thought I would think so was something wrong with the car. And that was probably in the 40s, I think he was there. He was an ag teacher. So, any other pranks that anybody remembers? The reason they tore the gym down on the Glen Echo School is because the guy that was maintaining it across the yard got tired of local people riding their horses around inside there on rainy days. And he said, somebody's going to get hurt in there riding those horses around inside the gym on rainy days. So he convinced the Glen Echo Club to tear the gym down. Because there are no doors on the thing, so they can go in and out of it as they wanted. And a thing they didn't remember, I remember, they had a grand piano in that gym.
They did, but there was a little room.
Yeah, a little room. And they did also at Liberty. They had a little room and they had a grand piano in there.
Grand piano.
So that was for stage presentations. That was for the Performing Arts Center type things they had. Because they did have artists come in once in a while, or people that could play, like Dawn, and play concerts for them. And there were local people. A lot of fiddling, a lot of dancing in the school. Anybody else?
I just wondered if anybody here has a memory of Glen Echo Community Club.
Of course, year after year, after month after month.
Me too.
Yeah, and of course they still call themselves a community club. So
Yeah.
They would love to have more. They now have swing dances up there, which has really helped bring in people to appreciate the school, because they've done a nice job of bringing it up to date, putting a new foundation under it, finishing the floor, putting a new roof on it, painting it. So they've done and put inside plumbing in it. Got inside plumbing in it. So
Did they put a bell in again?
And they put the original bell back. So the original bell disappeared and was gone for about 25 years. And then one day, somebody said that they had been out in their barn rummaging around the hay. They found this bell, and they wondered if the people would like it back. Now, there were people who guessed whose barn it was in, but up until then nobody knew for sure. And anyhow, they got their bell back. It was quite a caper, because the Glen Echo people had bought another bell from a place in Idaho. Mount Baker had torn down their Kendall school and given their bell to the Kendall chapel. And so they built a new school at Kendall, and they wanted their bell back to put up as a memorial at the school. Well, that would mean the chapel didn't have a bell. Well, by that time, Glen Echo had gotten their bell back, so they didn't want the bell they had bought previously. So Mount Baker School District took all three bells, refurbished them, polished them up, got them all going, and reinstalled them in the right belfries. So all three people came out winners on that one. And Mount Baker School District is the one that did the hard work. Well, it's hard. They figure it was one of the guys at the mill, which is right next door, loaned out one of his real big wrenches one night to some high school kids, I think it was. But anyhow, they returned later on that night and returned his wrench to him. But that was a 300 or 400 pound bell, was taken out of a belfry, over a railing, and down to the ground some way, and then hauled back to the barn, their family, the folks' barn. The folks never knew the bell was there until many, many years later, when the hay got so low that they finally saw this thing sticking out of the hay. And by that time, the boys were adults and long gone from home and had probably forgotten the caper. I think that we'll cut it off there for the day.
I
Thank
think
you.
I think they deserve